Blog Talk Radio. Welcome to Mind Shifters Radio with your co-host, the For-giveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce, and his wife Jeanie. Michael and Jeanie share with you the wisdom of the ancient Aramaic internal process of forgiveness. They offer tools and support 5 days a week. They will support you in building a solid foundation within yourself to live in pure love. In Aramaic, Rachma. Michael is the author of So Why Is This Happening to Me Again? For more information on Michael and Jeanie, please visit www.whyagain.com. And now your co-host, the For-giveness Doctor, Dr. Michael and Jeanie Ryce. To the brightness within you and the truth that is rooted within me. Hi, and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio with the For-giveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce. And it's good to be back with you. We were gone all last week, and thank you, Dr. Tim and Carol and everybody for covering for us. It was a relaxing time, and we appreciate you doing that. We have been celebrating Memorial Day, and this is day number 162 of our Memorial Day celebration. And Michael will talk more about that here in just a moment. I apologize for the chat room not being open yet. I've tried for about 10 minutes now, and I don't know if it's our internet connection here or what, but it is not wanting to open for me. But I will keep trying, so please just hang in there. And Michael, hi.
Hey, sweetie. It's back on the air, and to be able to say hello to everybody. We hope that your week was awesome, and we understand that that last week's shows were just so we're glad to be back. And I guess Dr. Tim can't be on because you don't have the chat room yet. Is that correct?
Well, he could be on the switchboard, but he is not on. And of course, the chat room, since it's not open, there's nobody in there right now. So as soon as I can get that to connect, and we'll get that going. But no, Dr. Tim and David, either one are on. Tim just came on. So, Tim, you're turned on.
Hello, Dr. Tim.
Well, hello, Michael and Jeanie. How are you?
Blessed and highly favored. How about you?
Quite the same. Quite the same. How was your week away?
It's good. It's a very relaxing time. Got some writing done, some work done, and got some quiet time, and it was good. It was excellent. Too short's the only thing. It could have been another 2 weeks. Would have been nice, but hey, you take what you can get when you can get it, right?
That's been my motto for years.
So we've heard from several people about how awesome the show was last week. Is there anything, Tim, that you have to share with us about how the show went, or were there any new learning opportunities that you received as part of doing the show?
Well, I think the learning opportunities were spared me by Diana and Carol, and I have to thank them for running interference with all the technology material. All I had to do was just be there and do the show. And the other thing I would say is I'd like to thank people like Marie and Rex and Richard and others, Nene and Dayu for calling in and supporting the show. And I think one of the things we were leaving with on Friday was the idea of how long do you have to do this? And if I've been doing it for 2 years and doing forgiveness work, how come I still have to keep doing it? So I had talked about the idea of several holistic doctors I know that talk to patients when they put them on a cleansing diet. And they say, how long do I have to do this? And the doctor says, well, I'll tell you what, why don't you give me 1 month on the healthy diet for every year you've been eating the standard American diet. And that usually gets people to have a whole different perspective. And so we talked about that a little bit on Friday before the end of the show, and that seemed to help some people think about, oh, yeah, I guess I have been doing it in an unproductive way for a lot of years, and there might be lots and lots of conditioning for me to undo. That's kind of where we left off.
Well, and when you look at, there's a link that Jeanie has on our website, and it's a video entitled "The Ghost in Your Genes." And when you look at that and you realize that it's not just how many years that I personally have been doing the off-base stuff, but it's literally how many years has my genetic history been doing the off-base stuff, been doing hostility and fear. And so when you put that in as part of it, that's a great way to explain it, because certainly the detox takes time and the restructuring and rebuilding, but it not only takes time in the physical body, as when one does a detox and cleanse diet and a healing dietary regimen, but the same happens in the mental and the emotional. So it's definitely not an overnight process, and that's just part of the game. Another way that I invite people to look at that too is to look at, okay, you're designed as a human being, and oftentimes we'll remind everybody, if you don't know or you're not sure about what a human life is, hold a newborn child. When you hold a newborn, you know exactly what a human life is. That's how you and I are designed to live 24/7, 365. Now, if you look at the overview of your life, and you realize that you're designed to be experiencing the active presence of love, I mean the physiological activity of love in every cell in your structure, continuously. If you think about your 24-hour day, how many hours, let's say your waking hours are, if you sleep 8 hours, your waking hours are 16. So of your 16 waking hours, how many minutes do you physically experience the active presence of love? And I can't tell you how many people over the years have said, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't even know what that means. What do you mean, the active presence of love? What do you mean, physically experiencing love? I've got aches, I've got pains, I've got. Okay, so now you get some sense of the depth of the work that you're going to have to do if you want to return to your human life. And for many people, it means that they're starting from zero, from scratch, because I've had hundreds of people over the years, if not thousands of people, I guess it'd be in hundreds, who've come up to me after a presentation and said, Michael, I don't know what you're talking about when you talk about the active presence of love. I don't even know what love is. Define it for me. And, of course, that's like, trying to define for the man from the jungles of South America who's never been out of a temperate climate, never seen a temperature below 80 degrees, trying to define for him the building of an igloo. It's like, where do you start? And so you start with the process of collapsing and undoing what never belonged in the first place, the hostility and fear. And I was talking to David this morning. I don't know if he's on the show yet, but he was going to be calling in. When I talked to him this morning, I was saying that out of our week and away, the thing that came back in my mind the thing I came back with most prevalent thing in my mind was the necessity of paying attention to and recognizing the signal that tells you that your mind is lying to you, that your mind is hallucinating something that isn't true. And because most of us have been taught to live in that signal and treat it as something valuable, it's a tough question. It's a tough thing to really start to say to yourself, you mean to tell me that every time my mind and my physiology have experienced some form of hostility or fear, my mind has been lying to me? My God, Michael, that means most of my life has been a lie. Yeah, sadly, when it comes to experiencing human life and living in the hallucinations of hostility and fear, most people's lives have been a total lie. Okay, so now let's deal with it. What do? You start collapsing the lie. Well, how do you do that? You learn forgiveness. And by the way, Jeanie mentioned the honoring of Memorial Day, and we're looking to support a change on planet Earth, and that is to get enough people through the gate of experiencing life from the point of view of an established human life, that is establishing in your own physiology the active presence of love 24/7, 365. And the reason we bring that into the conversation in regard to Memorial Day is because the reason why we have war on planet Earth, the reason why so many have been murdered, and, the people who keep records say there have been in excess of 200 million people murdered in the last, in known human history. And 130 million of those have been murdered in the last century. When you recognize that accelerating insanity and the capacity to destroy, why do we humans do that? I would offer that humans don't do that. Non-humans do that. Those who don't have access to a human life, those who live in hostility or fear, destroy. They destroy their relationships. They destroy their spouses. They destroy their abundance. They destroy their families, their children, their parents, their grandparents, their neighbors. They destroy everything they put their mind to. And so war is a result of that game of hostility, fear, and blame. And so our invitation is that just pick one issue in your life today, a small one, doesn't have to be a big major thing, where you're willing to look at your responsibility and to forgive. And that forgive word doesn't mean that you're going to let somebody else off the hook because of what's happening inside of you. The word forgive is the tool with which you go inside yourself and remove your hostility and fear. Doing that does not support the power structures of the world very well. That's why forgiveness, I would offer, has been disappeared and has been turned into the act of pardoning. I let you off the hook for what's happening inside of me. I forgive my spouse because I'm angry. I forgive my spouse because I'm afraid. Well, of course, that does nothing to change my anger and my fear. I forgive my neighbor because I'm in rage. Well, that's not going to do anything to change your rage. It may unhook your rage from your brain's image of your neighbor, so your relationship with your neighbor might improve, and then you think you're forgiven. But I'd offer you haven't forgiven at all. What you've done is pardoned. And forgiveness is about deleting, removing what never belonged inside of our structures. If that's a totally new conversation to you, then what I invite you to do is go to our website, www.whyagain.com, www.whyagain.com, and on the right-hand side there's a link that says Download Worksheets. And so the first 4 items under that link will give you the whole story of the actual forgiveness process. Nothing to do with letting others off the hook, but how you change what's happening inside yourself. So we invite you to, every day, pick one item, one issue, one place in your life where you have even the most minuscule amount of hostility or fear, and do some forgiveness work and watch how it changes. It's awesome. It's amazing. So, Jeanie, do we have, by the way, our phone number? If you have any questions about that process, any thoughts, our call-in number is 646-200-4169. We'd love to hear from you. If you call in and you have a question for us, please hit 1. And by hitting 1, that will put your hand up, and Jeanie will know that you want to speak. So, Jeanie, any callers? Any questions in the chat room? Is the chat room up yet?
Well, I did get the chat room back up. However, it keeps doing this reconnecting server thing, so I'm not sure that it's staying up. So I hope people are on there, but as of right now, I don't see anybody on there. We have several people on the phone, but they're all just listening. So like Michael said, if you want to talk, please press 1. And Tim, the exact same conversation has been going on with several emails I've received from several people in the last few days wanting to, either in denial saying that they have nothing to do worksheets on or that they've already done them or whatever. And so that's kind of a common thing, I think, for people to not want to go inside and look at what it is that they need to deal with.
Yeah, it's very intimidating for some of us, and people only do it when they're ready. So, the other side of the coin is I get a lot of people who call in and ask or talk to me in the group's process and ask, well, how do I get my fill in the blank, mother, brother, lover, husband, wife, dog, to do this work? And the answer is you don't get them to do it, but the most promising method I can recommend is just modeling it. If you're actually doing the worksheet process or the mind shifters and the still point breathing, and you're showing up differently in your life today than you were 6 months ago, that's the best advertisement there is and the best motivation there is for those people who are willing to make a change, to pick up the tools and use them.
That's absolutely right.
Definitely the modeling is key, and the willingness to live without the game, without the defense mechanisms of hostility and fear is a huge, huge piece of work that most people have such a belief in the benefits of hostility and fear. I can't tell you how many people argue with me when I talk about fear. And they go, well, gee, if I didn't have fear, I'd put my hand in the fire. It's like, well, why would you put your hand in the fire? You know the fire's going to burn. You don't need fear to inform you the fire's going to burn. You need intelligence. You have intelligence. Fear won't serve you. Fear will deteriorate your physiology and narrow your perceptual mind. It will defile your perception. And, it makes us kind of stupid. And if you look at what humans have been doing for so long on planet Earth, the number of people murdered, et cetera, it's pretty stupid. It's pretty bizarre. And so we're looking to restore a different state. I was talking to someone this morning, and I was saying that I was actually thinking about petitioning the government to invite them to consider creating a 51st state, because it's a state most people live in, and that is the state of confusion. It's where most people live their lives. And it's time for us to be restored to sanity, a life without confusion. It's amazing how many people will, as Jeanie was just saying, who, well, I don't have any work to do, and they live in a blustering, confused, indecisive, I don't know what to do state. But then when they're confronted directly, all of a sudden, they know it all. They know everything. They even know how to tell you to live your life. It's just an interesting game that gets played by this mind we call the non-being mind. And we're looking to restore each human being on the planet to their original human lives. So is David with us, Jeanie?
No, he's not.
No? Oh, okay. Well, I talked to him earlier, and he said he was planning to be on the show, but maybe something came up.
He just now popped on. Dave, you're on.
Hello.
Hey, welcome, David. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How about you, Michael?
I'm here.
Ah, okay. Good. Just now I got on there. I'm not sure what it is that you guys are chatting about today.
Well, so far we've done. Tim has shared a little bit about the show last week, and we've been talking about people who are in resistance, and the question that he's been asked often, and you and I had this conversation this morning, was how do you get other people to do their work and to move through the resistance? And, it's when you recognize that what you're asking people to do is to face 1,000 generations of every kind of insanity that's ever happened in the human or the non-human experience, then you start to realize that you're asking something very, very major of somebody. And it's not usually until they're ready. And I've seen it, when people were first exposed to this work, I've seen it take 10 years for them to be ready and come back and go, okay, tell me all that again. I got it. Now I know I need to do something. So it's a process.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Michael. And and Tim did such a fabulous job last week. He was doing the talks with all the folks and giving the feedback. It was great to hear him and all of the callers that called in. It was really kind of interesting to sit and listen to all of it. And, you know, you and I had made this comment before around you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And you can lead them to water and encourage them and give them and set the place for that to happen. There's a wonderful movie that I watched a couple of weeks ago. You can get it. I think it made it big in the theaters as well. It's called Buck, and it's based on the Horse Whisperer, the guy that's the Horse Whisperer. And I haven't talked with you about it yet. And it is about how do you get people to see things differently and how to be gentle and kind with them. This story, The Horse Whisperer, or Buck, it's about the guy that the movie was sort of kind of written about, and his life. And this guy had a really, really abusive life. I mean, for a child, and really, really abusive. For him to make this change and this shift, and now he teaches people about horses, although he says this isn't about horses. This is about getting people and showing people and letting them see themselves. So it's kind of right in alignment with what it is that we're doing. How do we get people to do things a little differently? And his whole thing was about being gentle and respectful. So that's my feedback for how do we get people to do it. We don't. We just create the space for them to do it.
Handling everything that's unlike that gentle, respectful space in ourselves so that we can actually live that. And, of course, the only place we can't live it is in the place where we don't have it. And interesting thing about life is that it's going to show up and bring to us the circumstances that will give us every opportunity we need to claim that space of love and gentleness and respect. So that's certainly an awesome opportunity.
And life is always going to give us those opportunities, whether we ask for them consciously or do them unconsciously. It's always going to be presented to us until there is some shift with it. And I'm looking at that so much through my process and where I'm at with things. I got carried away with the conversation. I just stopped at a corner business that's a tire repair business and sells tires. And I used to own the corner when it was a service station. That's some 35, 40 years ago, and all the changes. And this guy was wanting to hear about the changes. And we talked about how life is today for most people, and so restricted, and that there's very few people that are willing to be out there in order to guide and to teach people business practices versus customers and services and everything. It's just so lacking with it. And, you know, it will show up. We'll always get those opportunities in order to look and see what is it that I'm creating in my world. Change a lot of things on the outside, the buildings and all of the streets and the roads and the technology and everything is really advancing from looks on the outside, and there seems to be a real lack of this compassion and connection with people. Need more teachers, more people that are willing, not so many more teachers, it's people that are just willing to do one little thing today. You know, as you talk about with the memorial, and I read something this morning and I did a little writing on it, and I'm driving now, so I'm unable to pull it up, about doing just one little peaceful thing today. You know, we're all interconnected, and that is bringing the peace to the world. So no matter how small that it is, how small, it will make a difference.
For sure, and it's time for us to bring human experience, the actual experience of human life, and the establishment of that active presence of love into our culture and into the world's cultures. It's been missing for so long, and it's just time to return it. And we return it, a big key in the process. And of course, it's a conversation that most everybody's interested in. They go, wow, yeah, that sounds cool. Gee, I could have a great relationship with Joe and Harry and Bill and Mary and da-da-da-da. And hey, that sounds wonderful. And everybody, or most everybody, goes, hey, that's a cool conversation. I'd love to go there. But then, the first time that something that they're not willing to deal with surfaces, it's interesting how fast they turn around, how they'll talk lots of neat words about love. But boy, if you resonate the wrong brain cells in them, they will take your head off so fast that it will spin. And that's definitely, the ability to make that shift and that change is ingrained in us, but it's something that we have to work for because it's been lost for so long. And just to really question your mind when you're in hostility or fear and be willing to drop its lies is such a huge piece in the puzzle. Kim, how did the support group go last week?
Quite well. I'm here. You come in with a mouthful of sandwich.
Ah, okay. I didn't mean to catch you with your mouth full, but I was just wondering how the. By the way, I appreciate the fact that you take your lunchtime to out of patience and join us for the show and support us in doing it. It's awesome. But were there any exciting breakthroughs or anything that questions that came up that might be useful for our audience to be aware of? And by the way, Jeanie tells me the chat room just is not operational, it seems. And it's something going on with Blog Talk, so we'll see what we can get done with that. Are you able to get in the chat room on your end, Tim?
Yeah, I am. And we've got 7 people in there. Somebody was asking, how does this fix a process or help me process problems that I've created for myself in the past, such as living with a legal decision? For example, I can see that I could use this to avoid future problems, but is there a way to use this program to fix past problems? That's from someone named Florida Listener in the chat.
Absolutely, Florida Listener. And by the way, we are in Florida, and we'll be starting a workshop series next Sunday. We'll actually be doing the Sunday service at Unity of St. Petersburg, and we'll be doing a whole, through Thursday. So you can jump on www.whyagain.com. That will be next week, and then keep an eye on the calendar on the website. We've got several other things. We'll be in Boca Raton. We'll be in Fort Lauderdale. We'll be in Tampa. So there'll be a variety of things happening in Florida. But, yes, you absolutely can do this to change past realities. And say, well, gee, how does that work? Well, if you think about, we can use a computer analogy to really resolve this very well, and that is you have data in your computer that you hit keys and you put information in your computer and it's stored in your hard drive. Is it changeable? Yeah. Do you have a delete key? Yeah. Do you know where the delete key is? Yes. Well, then you can delete things, right? Oh, yeah, that's no problem. Okay, so you have an input, a set of keys, just like a set of keys on a computer, because taste, touch, smell, hearing, and sight. And those inputs register information in your structure. And if you don't know where the delete key is, it seems like those past issues just go on and on and on. That's the essence of my book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? Is that we replay what's stored in brain cells over and over and over again because nobody knows where the delete key is. We have been told that forgiveness is about letting other people off the hook because we're replaying some form of hostility or fear. And we think our hostility and fear is justified in this moment about this situation, when all hostility and fear, by definition, is from the past. It's a replay. And so the delete key is forgiveness. And so as you go in and you delete, let me give you an example. We had a young man at Heartland, this goes back several years ago, and he was in his mid-40s. This young man had not drawn, I mean literally had not drawn a sober or straight breath from the time he was 15 years of age. He started on alcohol at 15 and went into drugs, hardcore drugs. He had not drawn a sober breath. He was age 45. He came to Heartland. He quit cold turkey, and he started to do the work at Heartland. He had such rage with his father, such pain with his father, that he couldn't even think about or talk about his father, even though his father wasn't present. And if he did talk about him, it was always in derogatory terms, curse words, negativity. And I'll never forget the session where we did. It was in the middle of a 40-day intensive. It was toward the end of the intensive. And this young man had done a lot of pretty deep work and had been clean and sober for that time period. It was maybe, 32 or 34 days, something like that. And we did a breath session. And in his breath session, he tapped into who he was as the active presence of love. And his experience was that of, it was like he was a tree, and that his roots went down into the earth, and that he was gathering nourishment from the earth. And I think energetically there's something to that. But as he went through this experience, all of a sudden he was able to resolve and let loose of some of the rage that he had around his relationship with his father. And he came out of that session smiling, jovial, alive, and speaking about the wondrous memories he had of when he was a kid, and how his dad would hold him, and how his dad would do things with him, and how much his dad loved him. It was awesome to watch this young man go through that. And after the intensive, his father had cancer, actually, and he went to spend some time with his dad for the first time since he was a teenager. The only thing they'd ever had was trauma and hate between them. He went and he was able to spend some time with his dad, and a joyful time with his dad. His father lived in Michigan. His father and his mother, he knew he had less than a year to live. His father and his mother drove to Heartland. The young man was on a long-term program. He went up and visited his parents and then came back. They drove down to visit him at Heartland. And in tears, this man in his 70s with cancer is just so profusely thanking me for the fact that he had a relationship back with his son. And his son had been gone for 3 decades. Yeah, you can change those things from the past, absolutely. Now, doing that may not at first make a lot of sense in your belief system, that is, in your own BS. Your BS might be about how they did, and they, and it's all in there, and if only they, and all of that is a fraud and a lie. Your mind is telling you a lie. All you have to do is be willing to go inside yourself and change the root of the hostility and fear that takes you out of love, and you will have a totally different experience of your past. And it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. And our dedication, the understanding of that process is not something that comes easily. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this Mind Shifters Radio show, is to share with you the tools and how to go about doing that. And if you have any questions, we would be delighted to chat with you, too. Our calling number is 646-200-4169. We'd be delighted to chat with you and answer questions about how do you do this. And the starting point, of course, is please go to the site. You can download my book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again, free. Of course, we'd love it if you'd order it, or order the DVD or CD or what have you from our website. There are 20 different CDs, DVDs on the site, or 20 or more. and that's one of the ways we support our work. But you can download the book free, and on the right-hand side of the home page, there's a link that says Download Worksheets, about half a dozen links down. Click on that, download the first 4 links under that section. That will give you a written explanation of the forgiveness process. It'll give you a copy of the actual worksheet. And then there are 2 MP3s of radio shows that we've done in the past where people were brave enough to bring their issue forward, and we walked them all the way through a worksheet. The 3rd link in particular is so awesome, pardon me, to listen to, and so inspiring. This young lady was so courageous to face major, major issues in her life. So please, go to the website, listen to that link in particular, and you'll really get a sense. I mean, just in a very short period of time, less than an hour, you'll get a real sense of how this forgiveness process can change things. And you'll listen to the changes. I mean, this woman goes literally from speaking about how she actually fantasized getting a gun and killing someone to where she moved into compassion for this person, realizing her part in the process. So please download those links and go to work with, put the pen to the paper. Our calling number, 646-200-4169. We would love to hear your sweet voice and support you in this process. So, Jeanie, do we have any hands up or questions?
Michael?
Go ahead, Jeanie's just got another thought here, Tim, and then I'll turn to you. Just one second.
There's a 954, which I don't have a hand up there. It's Renee. Perhaps she would share, put her hand up if it's her, and share what she told us about the person doing the commitment to the future.
Okay. Yeah, Jeanie's just sharing that there is a 954 on the switchboard, and if it's Nene, she was inviting Nene to share the story. We had met with Nene on our way through Fort Lauderdale, and she shared with us about a young man who was estranged from his mother, and his mother started using the commitment. So, Nene, if that's you, put your hand up and please share that story with us. But in the meantime, Tim, go ahead.
The Florida listener says, to explain what I mean further, the doctor has given a good example, but what if your parents have been dead and there's no way to get the result he spoke of?
You can get exactly the result I spoke of. Whether your parents are alive or dead is irrelevant, because all of the pain and trauma that you're experiencing and feeling is inside of you. Now, you may not be able to get resolution with their physical bodies, but when you drop your end of the rope, your relationship with them will change. I remember working with a young woman actually it was an older woman. She was in her 60s. I don't tend to call them older at this point because I know we're all eternal. But this woman was 65 years of age, and in her home, the word death was not allowed. Her father was in his 90s, getting ready to pass, but nobody would admit it, nobody would talk about it. I had private practice in South Florida back then. This goes back about 20 years ago. And we worked through that issue, and she was able to start to deal with some of the painful realities that she'd been brainwashed with and programmed with as a kid around death. And she went home and started the conversation with her parents about death, and all hell broke loose. I mean, her household they went nuts. However, she held the space of love, and out of that conversation, this woman at the age of 65, for the first time, heard her father say the words, "I love you." Now, she heard that from his lips because he was still in his body. It was a short time later that he passed, and her mother, who was in her 90s, and she and her 2 children formed a circle, holding hands with her father as he passed, and said it was one of the most powerful family experiences they had ever had, and one of the most wondrous. And what she shared with me was that after he passed, she felt like she had a better relationship with him than she had ever had when he was alive. Your father, your mother, are still alive and well. They're just not living in bodies. You know, in the Aramaic language, the word dead doesn't mean what we mean by death, like end of the game. The word death means present elsewhere. So if you walked into a store and, say Harry was the proprietor and Harry's wife was there, and you said, "Gee, Jane, is Harry around?" And Jane would say, If she were Aramaic, Jane might say, Harry's dead. That doesn't mean he's left his body. It means he's present elsewhere. So he's over at another store on the other side of town. She'd say, it's an idiom, he's dead. And so, yes, you can still resolve all of that in you, and that's what's important and where it's important. And we've got a hand up. 786, where are you calling from, and who have we got on the line?
Hi, Michael, it's Dayu.
Hello, Dayu. Nice to hear from you.
Good to hear from you, too. It's I've just been on the show for the last few minutes, and it's always wonderful to listen to what you have to say to everyone. I have one that's come up for me with one of my clients in Project Momentum who has received 4 sessions, but wanted not to do the work. And then finally, I had sent out an email to everyone to say, could you all please just give me a list of some of the resistances you feel when you are doing this work? And
right.
He wrote to me to say, I want to cancel session 5 because I don't think it's doing anything for me. And when I reminded her of how well she had, how great she had felt after the last session we had done together, she's saying, it's too much pressure, it's too much work, you're just telling me more things to do. And she was like, I said, okay, I accept that you don't want to do anymore, and you have, it's your free will to do what you want to do. But deep inside of me, I was feeling so sad because she had such incredible results in some of the sessions. She was unable to see them, and she wasn't giving herself a chance to do just maybe the next little bit that would give her just what she needed, So
I understand.
I don't know, I'm sure being a facilitator, you've been there. So my question to you is, you do let go, but how do you respond to those kinds of situations? How do you deal with them?
Well, the first order of business I would offer would be for you to heal your sadness. Sadness is based in fear and loss. And so as you as a facilitator, you will draw in the people who are going to show you what you need to heal. Jeanie used to share when she did the support groups that the particular topic she was going to cover in her support groups that week, she'd have to face that issue in spades so that she could learn it and teach it. And so I'd offer that your sadness is her gift to you, to see that your mind is still capable of sadness around people who aren't willing to do their work or aren't willing to affirm what you're doing or whatever the dynamic is. There may be any one of a dozen different dynamics. So that would be the first one. And the second one is to recognize that, my job, I can remember going through this. It's like, well, everybody's got to get this. And now I realize that my job isn't for everybody to get this. My job is to put it out there to everybody that I can put it out to. And those who are ready will make the move, and those who aren't won't. And, we had a conversation this morning, Dayu, and you were sharing about a breath session that you had at Heartland when you were there this summer doing teachers training, and how when you came out of that session, there were people who had these, seemingly, fabulous, sensational type results, and yours was, for you, kind of dull. But then what you shared with me today is how monumental that shift was for you in your life, and right. What a difference it made. So in the moment, notice that the mind can minimize whatever the experience is, and will tend to try to keep the experience the same as what it's always been. And it's a process to shift out of that into the awareness of the changes that take place and to appreciate and value them. And as I said earlier in the show, there have been people who, when I've presented this, I remember one woman who came to a workshop and she bought a bunch of the materials, went home, put them on the shelf. 10 years later, I get this frantic call from her. I've got to do an intensive. I'm going through a divorce, and I was bending over, and your book fell off the shelf and hit me in the head, and I sat down and read it, and all of a sudden, I heard everything you were saying. I've got to get to an intensive yesterday. It's like, well, we're 2 months away from our summer intensive season, so you're going to have to wait a little bit. But here, start doing worksheets. And I mean, she was at the first intensive 2 months later, and she was ready to go to work. You've planted a seed. You never know when the fruit's going to come forward. And, you know, it may not come forward in that particular person, but that particular person's behavior may change the behavior or the whole life experience of their child, and their child will bring forward fruit that you can't imagine. So I would just, do some work around your sadness and recognizing that your job is to sow the seed. And you may not be around to water it. You may not be around to prune it. You may not be around to watch it bloom, but it will bloom when it's time.
Wow, that was very profound. Thank you.
And I know, Dr. Tim, you've never experienced people having any kind of resistance or wanting to be right about what's going on in their world, right?
Well, it's what you say. It's that is the whole game. And the key, as I've learned and you've learned, is to turn the tool on myself then to find, am I feeling sad? Am I feeling angry? Am I feeling hurt that they won't do what I know? If they did what I told them, I know they'd get better. I just know it. I have all these years of training and all this expertise, and so every time I get into that position, I know it's time for me to do work on me. And when people leave the office and they're not feeling better and they're angry or they cancel a session right when there's a lot of good progress being made, I just bless their hearts, and I look for any upset in me and then go to work on that. So I have to echo the recommendation that, Dayu, you pull out some worksheets and find out what's going on in you that got stirred up around sadness or fear, and be done with it. We know you can.
Yeah, if Dr. Andraki happens to be on, he listens to the show on occasion, and even though he's working, and if he happens to be on, maybe he'd call in because he has a kind of a fun way of referring to it. He's, oftentimes will process what's happening with some of his patients, and one of his things is, he'll often repeat to me, well, I started to talk to this person about being responsible and doing their work, and, it's really funny. They just knew they were right, and that's just the way it was. And he'll kind of grin at me and say, "No, you've never run into that before, right, Michael?" And so, but yeah, that's the common condition, because the major attribute of what we call the non-being mind, the hostility and fear-based mind, is inertia. It has been in the programming phase for thousands of generations. And with those thousands of generations, when you look at that idea of generation, the root of the word generation, genare, it means cause. All of those causes going on tend to be inertia-bound. And if you remember from physics class in high school, the word inertia means a particular body moving in a particular direction at a particular rate of speed will tend to continue to move in that direction at that rate of speed until it's acted on by an outside influence. So that's inertia. It's going to keep going. This non-being mind, if we've lived our whole lives in hostility, fear, terror, grief, rage, sadness, physical, mental, emotional confrontation, if that's where we've lived, that database, and it is just a database, is going to tend to continue to play out its game until you wake up from it and you realize that your identity is not that. Your identity is that of a being called love. In some circles, that's called being reborn. And reborn meaning I stop living as this hostility and fear-based being, and I realize that I am the awesome active presence of love. And I bring my being, love, to bear on the activity of hostility and fear in my mind. Now, if that's not a practice skill yet, that muscle, so to speak, is going to be kind of weak. And the inertia-bound hostility and fear mind is going to come up, and it's going to batter you and batter them and and run away and leave. If the person is saying, well, this is my fifth session and nothing's happened, when they've had this whole list of results, we'll actually have people who go through a still point session at an intensive at Heartland, and they'll say, well, when it's their turn, if they choose to share, they'll said, well, nothing really happened for me. And then they'll go and say, well, I remember the place where you were in that deep still point. Do you remember what was that? Oh, well, I just had this visit from my father who's been dead for 20 years, and he came to me and he told me he loved me, and he wanted me to let him loose because he was stuck in the hostility and fear that he'd done to me because I was still stuck in it. And then they'll go on with, like, monumental stories, and they start out with, oh, nothing really happened. Because the attribute or the game that this non-being mind will play is it will attempt to make the biggest breakthroughs the most threatening thing possible and attempt to remove them. And that's why it takes an ongoing committed process to keep doing your work and to move past that inertia-bound propensity.
Oh, thank you. It was very insightful. And thank you, Dr. Tim.
You're very welcome and deserving.
So are there any other comments in the chat room, Tim?
Well, let me look again. I had...
Tim, you still can't get in it. Must be something with our connection here. We're at a timeshare in Orlando and just not cooperating. David, are you still with us?
Are you there?
I'm here.
All right. The Florida listener says, by making my own bad decisions, I've been in anguish by suffering the consequences of not being able to raise my own child. How would I use this program to fix this? At this point, I'm not blaming others, only myself.
Yeah, well, blame is blame. It doesn't matter who you do it on. Here's my thought for you. You are an innocent being called love. Everything else was this genetic propensity to keep doing insanity. You're not to blame for that. Now, so your worksheets, your initial worksheets I would offer would be with you yourself as the subject of the worksheet and forgiving blame until you're finished with blame. Now, here's what I know about your life, and we've only heard a few sentences from you that Dr. Tim has repeated. But from what has been shared, when you think about these things, you're under stress. What I know is that when we're under stress, we do what our power person did that we hated the most. So let me just ask an off-the-wall question. How much of your life with your interaction with your power person, which is usually mom or dad, were you blamed by them? Now, you really don't need to answer because I already know the answer. If you're under stress and you're doing self-blame, then what your power person used to do was blame you for everything. And so you've picked up that habit and you've been true to the good old family system of blaming you. Now it's time to stop. It's time to let that loose. And until you move that cloud of blame out of the way, you're not going to see very many other options as to what the possibilities are to clean up. You can't change the physical fact of what happened in your past. That's going to remain. However, you can change your realities about that past. Let me share an example in particular. I used to have a private practice in South Florida, and there's a woman who had a daughter, and her daughter was 11 years of age when she ran away from home, disappeared, gone. She doesn't know. She hasn't heard from her daughter in 8 years. So if her daughter's alive now, her daughter is 19. But she doesn't know whether she's alive or dead. She does some forgiveness work around her pain and anguish and guilt about her daughter running away and the part she played in her daughter running away. 3 days later, she got a phone call from Southern California. Hey, Mom, just checking in. Wanted to let you know I'm okay and make sure that you're okay. 8 years. 3 days later, she gets a phone call. Now, I could tell you story after story after story after story of people who've seen those kinds of changes. That's what happens. Things turn around. So I don't know what that's going to look like for you, but I know that the first order of business is going to be for you to let go of the blame you hold toward yourself the anger you hold toward yourself and to begin to forgive the anguish. So now what the culture generally would say, well, you just forgive yourself for this, and you just forgive your spouse for the anguish, and you forgive your child for the fact that they're not there. I say don't ever forgive anybody for anything. Stop. That's a mistake. That's nothing to do with forgiveness. You apply forgiveness to your blame, to your anguish, to your guilt, to your fear, to remove those things from your physiology. Authorities who want us to be in hostility and fear purposely, from the beginning, program us with that stuff so that anytime they want to yank our chain and get us back in line, they can just resonate the hostility or fear. When you begin to forgive, you apply forgiveness to those conditions in your mind to remove them. Then, if somebody comes along and resonates what yesterday would have been your guilt, so you work through the guilt around not raising your child, and you happen to get a note from your former spouse who helped to take the child away and blah, 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 and you happen to get a note from them with a little dig about, I got to raise them and you didn't even get to see them grow up. If you don't have any guilt left, then you won't have guilt in response to that. The reality output from your mind will be free of guilt. You'll have a mind of clarity, and you'll be able to see the littleness, the smallness, and the pain that your former spouse, and just using that as an example, that your former spouse is in, to have to say such a thing to someone who at one time you shared a love relationship. You'll be able to hold compassion for them. As I said earlier, go to the website, go to WhyAgain, WHYAgain.com, and on the right-hand side, the link, 6 links down, is download worksheets. The third link is a radio show. And it is so awesome to watch how this woman removes her hostility and fear and has a totally, literally, in the shared time of less than an hour, moves from a place where in one place in her worksheet she's been visualizing getting a gun and killing somebody with it, literally. And she moves to a space of compassion for that person. Then you'll know your human life is back. And when you have a human life, you'll no longer have hostility or fear towards self or others, your former spouse included, and you will be a space of compassion. When you are a space of compassion, energetically, everything in your world, everything in your physiology, and everything in your life will start to shift. That's how it works. But they haven't told us that we have that kind of power and that kind of access to those hidden parts of ourselves. And so it sounds pretty fantastical at first. And I invite you not to believe anything that I'm saying. I invite you to put the pen to paper and try it, see what happens. And you'll probably be on the show in a very short period of time, within days, calling us saying, I can't believe this, but you should see what happened. You should experience the difference I'm feeling. This is awesome. How did this occur? It's called forgiveness. Please put the pen to the paper. Yes, you're going to look at deeper levels of your pain, your upset, your sorrow. And as you remove those deeper upsets of pain and upset and sorrow, you start to live a life without pain, upset, and sorrow. You get to live the best year yet of your eternal life, and that's what we're here to support you in. Bring a stranger to the show tomorrow. It's been a delight to share with you. Thank you, Tim, David, Dayu, and our caller from Florida. Blessings.
Thank you for listening to Mind Shifters Radio with the For-giveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce, and his wife, Jeanie, who present that internal Aramaic process of forgiveness. Michael and Jeanie are here every Monday through Friday on Earth Angels Radio. For more on Michael and Jeanie, please visit www.whyagain.com. That's www.whyagain.com.